What is going on, everybody? Welcome into our off-season blueprints mini-series where we're going to be previewing each NFL team's kind of upcoming off-season, impending free agents, who I'd keep, who I'd be targeting in free agency, and a combination of other moves to basically fix your team. We started this on the Fully Inflated Football podcast, and I've just had some time to kind of think about how I want to do this series. So I'm going to do it like you're seeing right here. I'm going to upload each division as its own episode. I will go back and pull that section from the Fully Inflated Football podcast on the NFC West. I will create a video like this similarly. So we're going to get through all 8 divisions, and then you will also be able to find these as an audio format of the podcast up on your audio feeds. So after like 2 or 3 are done, I'll lump them together. I'll do the mailbag in the audio podcast only for the patrons out there. And we're going to be able to release these kind of throughout the next 2 weeks leading up to free agency. It's going to time out really well. It's going to allow me to provide some content while I really dig deep into my NFL draft scouting over the next couple weeks with the combine and stuff. I'm going to be very busy doing my evaluations. So this is really the chunk of the big chunk of content that you're going to be getting over the next couple weeks. I really hope you guys enjoy it. Please do hit that like button if you do, and check out the Fully Inflated Football podcast on your audio formats, and please leave a review if you do. Let's go ahead and get started with the Los Angeles Chargers. No particular order here, but I do find the Chargers particularly fascinating because they, more than maybe anybody else out there, are going to be big spenders. As they head into free agency, they have the second most cap space at $57 million. And as we talked about in the NFC West version, you can create pretty much as much cap space as you need to, especially if you're the Chargers and you haven't done a ton of that void year, kicking the can down the road stuff. So the Chargers will pretty much have the money to sign almost anybody they want, which is really exciting. We spend so much time talking about the value of a rookie quarterback's contract and maximizing on that. Now they got $57 million in cap space. Most of that is what you would have to pay a guy like Justin Herbert in a few years when that contract kicks in. So this is a championship window for the Chargers, a team that won 9 games last season, looking to take that big jump into 2022. Now, they're going to have to start by figuring out what they want to do with this long list of impending free agents for them. So you've got Mike Williams, Jared Cook, Donald Parham, so 3 playmakers for you. Parham is a restricted free agent, so they should be able to retain him pretty easily, but you still got to work that out. On the offensive line, your right guard situation, Ode Abushi, Michael Schofield are impending free agents. And then your right tackle, Brian Bulaga, probably going to be someone they release to clear up some more cap space. Gosh, he's played like 6 games for them. It was very predictable. I tweeted it when they signed him. I was like, this is a recipe for disaster. You were putting maybe the most injury-prone player in the NFL, not named Jason Verrett at the time, with the LA Chargers, who have just had this horrific medical staff. So he has not been able to stay healthy. Do you release Brian Bulaga as opposed to counting on him to stay healthy in what's supposed to be this kind of championship run for you? I think he's a pretty likely release for the Chargers unless they feel good about his medicals, but I don't know how you could. So you're probably losing your right guard, your right tackle there. Justin Jackson is a decent second running back for them. He's going to be hitting the market. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you're losing really the only defensive tackle that's any good for you, or the 2 defensive tackles that are any good for you, in Justin Jones and veteran Linval Joseph. You're losing Uchenna Nwosu, who's a starting edge player and a good scheme fit for them. And then you're losing Keyz White, breakout athletic linebacker for them, and Chris Harris Jr. So that is a laundry list of players hitting the market. So the first thing we got to do as the Chargers, as we set up our offseason blueprint for them, is discuss who do we want to keep. And for me, it starts with Mike Williams. That's the big conversation that you got to have. And I went back and forth on this because there's some really big name free agents available at wide receiver. And I think it's almost, I don't know if worth it is the right word, but it is tempting. That's what I'm looking for. It is tempting to let him test the market and maybe see if you can attract an Allen Robinson or a Chris Godwin or, Odell Beckham or something like that. Although Odell's coming off the ACL, that's a little bit of a different situation. But mainly Robinson and Godwin. Like, that would be an upgrade to Mike Williams. But free agency is just a different animal. You don't know if you're going to be able to get those guys to sign, and you can't tamper with him. So for me, it's like, look, Mike Williams is in a situation right now where he can be exactly what he is, a perimeter number 2 receiver and a guy that has outstanding chemistry with Justin Herbert on back, shoulders, third down, sticky situations where Herbert can use that elite arm talent, the ability to put the ball wherever he wants, whenever he wants, and put it in a position where, what's a 50-50 ball for most wide receivers. For Mike Williams, it's more of a 60 or 70% ball. So I do think he's in a great spot. He's probably going to cost you a little bit more than you might like for a number 2 wide receiver. It's probably going to come around that $15-16 million mark, if not a little bit more. But I really liked what I saw from Mike Williams last year, especially in the first kind of 2 months of the season. He did drop off a little bit. I do still want that long-term Keenan Allen replacement. He did seem to be on the downward trajectory last year. And it's tough because if you sign Mike Williams, you're probably not going to go get a Robinson or a Godwin, who are younger receivers who could be those long-term alphas for you. Difficult decision, but I would probably play it safe with that. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, or whatever the saying is. I would re-sign Mike Williams and not let him hit the market and get a big contract somewhere else. Then Donald Parham, I would do the RFA tender on him. You have Jared Cook heading into free agency. He could be a starting tight end for you. He's a player that I've really talked a lot about going back to the XFL when, he really came out of nowhere he was on the Dallas team and just ascending, making the most of every opportunity he's gotten for the Chargers. The moments of 6'7" Herbert or 6'6" Herbert throwing to 6'7", 6'8" Donald Parham, it's almost indefensible at times. So I would be excited to bring Donald Parham back. That's a pretty easy decision. I think they'll do that. And then another guy that I would keep actually is Justin Jackson. He'd be very cheap. I don't think he's going to have this big demand out there. When I look at Austin Eckler, he's very good, but you do need to, I think, have more of a running presence. And because he's so cheap, you bring him back as a placeholder, kind of early down back for you. If nothing else, he provides really good depth. Like if he's your third running back, that's outstanding. Again, very cheap, but I would bring him back. And then the other big one here is Keyz White. I do think you have to pay him. Kenneth Murray just hasn't really taken that next step. Former first round pick for the Chargers. Drew Tranquill's fine, but Keyz White really emerged as a stud defender for them. And I don't think you want to mess with that. They didn't get a ton of young players really emerge in Brandon Staley's defense in year one, but Keyz White was one of those guys that really thrived. I really don't think you can mess with that. I would bring him back, even if he's going to cost you a pretty penny. So again, of that long list, I'm letting most of these guys go. The players I'm resigning are Mike Williams, Donald Parham on the RFA tender, Keyz White at linebacker, and a little re-sign on Justin Jackson. And then you're basically heading into free agency now after you released Brian Bulaga with a ton of money and a ton of needs. And it's like a super exciting team to project free agency, because as I look at their remaining teams after those re-signings, here's how I would list them. Interior defensive line, a huge need. This team has really struggled against the run, and I don't see that changing if they don't do anything about it. Edge, opposite of Joey Bosa, with Uchenna Nwosu leaving, he is a guy that I think I would let test the market. You could certainly think about bringing Uchenna Nwosu back, but I think you can be patient on that. There's a lot of options at edge this year, whether it's in free agency or the draft. So I wouldn't rush to bring Uchenna Nwosu back, but you do need to replace that second edge position. Cornerback is going to be a need for them. You've got Asante Samuel, but you're losing Chris Harris in the slot. I think a lot of Chargers fans are okay with that. He has really dropped off. But your perimeter corner, who are they starting? Tavon Campbell. I don't know if you want to lean on him heading into 2022. when you hope to have a championship caliber defense and in the slot, you're going to have to fill probably 2 starting spots at corner. So we're already talking about you need a starting D tackle, you need a starting edge guy, you need 2 starting corners. That's just on the defensive side of the ball. Then you look on offense, you do need to replace Brian Bulaga. So that's a 5th starter. You got to find somebody at right tackle, and they're probably not going to find that in the draft, if I'm going to be honest. So you're probably going to really want to attack that in free agency. Right guard, you lost your 2 right guards from last year with Ibushi and Schofield. So you want to bring in there. That's 6 starters you got to fill. I still think you could upgrade at running back other than Justin Jackson. I like Justin Jackson, but I think you can find value at running back for a guy that can have a little bit more of that workhorse, not even workhorse, but just like more of a power style that you don't have in Austin Eckler. And then tight end, I still think is in need. I really like Donald Parham, but again, you're hoping for championship aspirations next year. He's an unproven player as a starter, so I think it would be smart to consider signing a more established tight end next to Donald Parham. Keep bringing along Parham as more of that role player. And then I do think they need speed at wide receiver as well. So there's a lot of starting holes for them. I think we counted 7 spots as we look into free agency that they need to find starters at. And then there's different roles and depth like running back, tight end, and speed at wide receiver that they could also address. So that's very exciting. You're also in LA, Justin Herbert. Like, you're going to be able to be a priority free agent destination for a lot of big name players. So let's talk about these different position groups and where they might be able to attack here. So starting with the interior defensive line, there is a player that I think this is one of the most no-brainer free agent predictions that you could find. Sebastian Joseph Day to the LA Chargers. He's a defensive tackle, played for the Rams, played under Brandon Staley, had his best year in 2021, or in 2020 rather, with Brandon Staley. Fills a need, a player that Brandon Staley is very familiar with. Kind of a no-brainer for me. I think that might be one of the first deals of free agency right there. So lock it in. Sebastian Joseph Day to the Chargers, calling my shot on that one. But there's a couple other defensive tackle options out there that are also great fits and people that are familiar with Brandon Staley who had their best seasons under Brandon Staley. And it was actually all the way back. You got to trace him back through LA, through Denver, right? And then did Staley go to Denver? I can't remember, but back to Chicago where Staley was under Vic Fangio and those elite Bears defenses when they were in the Super Bowl conversation with Mitch Trubisky as their quarterback. Well, that front 7 for that Bears team is one of the best ones in recent memory. And I think Brandon Staley is going to remember guys like Akeem Hicks and Bilal Nichols who thrived in his system. So those are 3 names. I wouldn't be surprised if we see all 3 of those guys end up for the Chargers. And that would be a complete overhaul of that interior defensive line overnight. So Sebastian Joseph Day, Akeem Hicks, Bilal Nichols, refreshing and adding more girth to that Chargers defense up front. And then I look at the edge. We mentioned Uchenna Nwosu hitting the market, and at this point, I think you can definitely engage in conversations with Nwosu. I think he's a good scheme fit. It's just a matter of, can you get him back on a value? Because I'm not going to pay Uchenna Nwosu, 3 years, $30 million, or whatever he might demand somewhere else. I would be patient there, especially when I look at this draft class and this group of free agents. There's a ton of options that are at Uchenna Nwosu's level. I would say 2 players that would make a ton of sense to me to come to the Chargers would be Zadarius Smith, either through free agency if he gets released by Green Bay, or this might be one of the few trade destinations for Green Bay to send Zadarius Smith because he does carry a large cap number. I think it's at like $28 million, but the Chargers could technically actually squeeze that in given how much cap space they have. Not a lot of teams are going to be able to, but the Chargers are one of them. Zadarius Smith has played now in that Brandon Staley style defense, if only for a couple games, but it is the correct fit there. Another guy is Von Miller, who of course Brandon Staley, you can draw the comparisons to the Von Miller days back in Denver under Vic Fangio. So those are two kind of premium edge players that you put those guys on the opposite of Bosa. If you could also add those interior defensive linemen, that is just a reglorification of this Chargers front. Other kind of cheaper options on the edge that I think would really fit what they want to do with the kind of 3-4 Fangio style edge would be Dante Fowler for really cheap. Another guy, Brandon Staley. I don't want to do this with every single player, but Fowler, I suppose, would have been pre-Brandon Staley days for the Rams, but a similar concept where he's that stand-up edge, can do a little bit of everything, and I think he'd be cheap. The other thing about Fowler is you can sign him before free agency, actually, so that anything you spend at that position doesn't go towards your compensatory cap formula, but that's a pretty deep dive. Anyway, Dante Fowler, Lorenzo Carter, a couple other cheap options on the edge there to start opposite of Bosa. And of course, Uchenna Nwosu. And then I look at cornerback. I do think you need another perimeter corner, and I think you need a slot corner. So on the perimeter, a couple guys I'd be calling. Rasul Douglas, who just thrived in this system in Green Bay last year. I would call Casey Hayward and see if he would have any interest in returning to the Chargers. I could see someone like Isaiah Oliver in a different system, maybe having some success. He's a former second-round pick with the traits to really play that zone-heavy system, but was kind of thrust into the slot for the Falcons, and it didn't really work out. Or you could go the veteran route. You could call it Patrick Peterson, Xavier Rhodes, Jimmy Smith. A lot of options there in free agency at cornerback. And then in the slot, Desmond King, you want to come back? I mean, that'd be pretty sweet if they could just bring Hayward and Desmond King back. They might be willing to do that. I mean, it's a really attractive place to play. I don't know if there's any bad blood there, but with the way things ended, I know Desmond King ended up getting traded from this very front office away, but those guys would really fit the zone-heavy Brandon Staley defense. So those are some names to keep an eye on at corner. Could also look in the draft. It's a good cornerback class. I do like the idea of them at running back, going for a Leonard Fournette, Melvin Gordon, Marlon Mack, more of a power back style. Another former Charger there, Melvin Gordon. Would he be interested in coming back, reuniting with Austin Eckler? Perhaps. And then the big question is the right side of the offensive line there. I will not be talking this many circles for any other team, but this is going to be the excitement of the Chargers offseason is they're going to land a long list of free agents, in my opinion. So the last thing we got to look at here is offensive line. Right guard, does a Brandon Sheriff hit the market? Is Washington stupid enough to let him out of the building? Maybe. I wouldn't be stunned. I don't know if that happens, but otherwise, some really good pass protector options might be Alex Kappa, Lucas Patrick from Green Bay. Just, plug and play right guards that would give you some better pass protection for Herbert. The big target for me in free agency for the Chargers after all of this is going to be Teron Armstead, the tackle from the Saints. And he is going to be the number one guy on pretty much everyone's free agency boards. He is going to get money thrown at him because he is a premium tackle, a type of player that just doesn't normally hit the market, but because of the way things have played out in New Orleans, he is going to hit the market. A guy that hasn't had the best health, but it's not like Brian Bulaga levels of concerns, right? So Teron Armstead, to me, I think it's either going to be the Chargers or the Bengals, really, are the two teams that I think are going to have the appeal to him to try and get a ring, have the money to throw at him, and are desperate enough for a tackle. Now, in both situations, he's going to have to kick over and play right, something he hasn't done, but I think he can handle it. But anyway, I would do everything in my power to attract Teron Armstead, because that would be such a massive upgrade to Storm Norton, who, frankly, you can make a case cost them the playoffs at the end of the day, because Max Crosby just obliterated him in that final game of the season. So try and get Teron Armstead. If you can't, there are other options, just not nearly as ideal. Does Seattle let Brandon Shell out of the building? Potentially an option there. Cornelius Lucas is a very underrated name, a guy that has only played well wherever he's been, but for whatever reason, no one's ever trusted him to be a starter. I think the Chargers could bring him in as a right tackle, and he could give them way better performance than what they've gotten. And then another guy is Joseph Noteboom. I don't think the Rams will let him out of the building, but they're dealing with some tough cap stuff themselves. Noteboom could sneak out of the Rams and stay in LA, but go to the other team and start at right tackle for the Chargers. A couple other role player free agent targets for them. I do think getting some speed at wide receiver would be nice, and these aren't necessarily role players, but if they have the money, how sweet would it be to see the Chargers bring in like a Will Fuller, DJ Chark, even like a Marquez Valdez-Scantling, something like that, just a dominant deep threat for Justin Herbert, who has this vicious arm. What if you could pair him with a guy like Chark or Fuller as a deep threat? That'd be really fun to see, and it would really let Williams and Keenan Allen thrive in the areas that they succeed in. And then some tight ends to target to pair with Donald Parham would be Dalton Schultz, who should be getting out of Dallas, just a very balanced starting caliber player, can do a little bit of everything. And you could talk to Jared Cook, bring him back for another year, get a longer look at Donald Parham, maybe you rotate those guys. I think you let Jared Cook test the market, but if he wants to keep playing, he was pretty good there, so I wouldn't be surprised if they bring him back later in free agency. I know that was very difficult to keep track of, and we just spent like 20 minutes talking about the Chargers free agency alone, but it's like the most exciting team free agency wise to talk about. So it will be easier to track this moving forward. But then, as you look towards the draft for the Chargers, they're so volatile as far as the long list of free agents and the amount of free agents they're going to target, the amount of needs they have. It's almost impossible at this point in time to even talk about the draft for them because their needs are going to be reshaped so strongly. But maybe you could find, fill a couple of those last needs in free agents, through the draft, be it edge or tackle or something like that. I don't know. Or speed at wide receiver. There's a lot of that in this class. Okay, got to take a quick deep breath because that was a lot on the Chargers. But our next team is no less interesting. It's just different. As in, like, you're not targeting pretty much every free agent available like you are with the Chargers. The Denver Broncos are our next team here. And they're interesting because how often have we talked about the Broncos as this team that's really in a good position to compete right now if they just had a damn quarterback? So that's your number one question mark for the Broncos and your number one priority for this whole offseason. But to be completely honest, their outlook right now is not looking great. They seem to have put so many eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket because they know and knew last year that if Rodgers is going to leave Green Bay, he's going to Denver. That's such a lock to me. It's either retirement, Green Bay, or Denver. I don't think anywhere else is even on the table. Like the Steelers and Washington and other teams considering Rodgers, it's like, it's not going to happen. It's Denver or Green Bay or he's done, like, period. But right now, it's looking like a lock that Rodgers is returning to Green Bay. I know he hasn't made his, decision yet, but just if you look at all of the tea leaves in Green Bay, you listen to what Rodgers has said, he's coming back. So that's really not an option for Denver. Now, there's a couple other potential options in the trade market. Derek Carr is not going to happen. I think Derek Carr is staying with the Raiders at this point. That seems crystal clear. But Deshaun Watson is available. So that's, to me, the next conversation you have to have. Is basically at the same time, you got to talk about Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson. And pursue those and discuss if you want to pursue those. From a football perspective, it's a no-brainer. I think they're Super Bowl contenders right away with either of those quarterbacks. With Deshaun Watson, there's obviously the murky off-the-field drama. And you have to have conversations with your owners. You have to have conversations, frankly, with your fans and with your, or at least think of your fans' perspective. I've talked about this, but when you trade for Deshaun Watson, he is becoming the face of sports in your state. You get a franchise quarterback. When you're thinking about Colorado, you're now going to think about Deshaun Watson. So we need to find out what's true. What did he do? What is he going to do in the community to make amends for what he's done? There's so many things that are out of my mind, and I'm very glad I don't have to make that decision. But if you're the Broncos, you've put all your eggs in this veteran quarterback basket when you didn't take Justin Fields or Mac Jones last year. So you've got to consider this. And honestly, I'd probably do it as long as he's cleared legally and can play next year. It's the grim reality of the NFL, but I'd probably do it. But that's obviously not something that it may not be available to them to go get Deshaun Watson. Someone else might outbid them. I don't know who else would, but the other one would be Russell Wilson. I really don't think the Seahawks are going to trade Russell Wilson. So I could see Deshaun Watson to Denver. And I think they're very strongly considering it. And I think they've gotten desperate enough at this point after missing out on Aaron Rodgers that they would go get Deshaun Watson. Maybe that's always been their backup plan when they didn't take Justin Fields. So that could very realistically happen, but let's pretend it doesn't. Because if it does, that's great. And your offseason's pretty set because you're inheriting Watson's contract. That cap number is going to change pretty quickly, and you're giving up a ton of picks to go get him. So that's pretty much your offseason if you go trade for Deshaun Watson. But let's imagine they miss out on Watson and Russ, and they have to think about other veteran quarterbacks. Who might those guys be? Do you think about a Carson Wentz? Maybe. You're obviously taking a massive drop off there, but what's better, trading a 4th round pick for Carson Wentz, which is probably about what he'd cost at this point, or drafting Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis? I don't have a great answer for you, but that's the world you're in if you miss out on Deshaun Watson. Do you think about a Jimmy Garoppolo and just hope he can give you that baseline of play, that you can build a great defense around him and he's going to have these great playmakers? I think you also have to think about that. I'm not going to say yes or no on either of those things, but those may be options that are the best case scenario for Denver if they miss out on Watson and Rodgers. Now, if you're not trading for Wentz or Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm not trading for anything below the Jimmy Garoppolo level. I don't even know who those guys would be, but Jimmy's like the cutoff as far as trading before free agency. So if you don't go Wentz, you don't go Jimmy, you miss out on Rodgers and Watson, you kind of got to make the difficult decision that Drew Lock is your active starter heading into free agency and the draft. Now that's, you're not guaranteeing he starts week 1. I'm just saying you're treating him as the starter and seeing what else you can do. So as we approach free agency now, and if we missed out on Deshaun Watson, you've got the 6th most cap space in the NFL. It's part of why it's such an attractive landing spot for Aaron Rodgers. You can get that big contract. You can still attract some free agents. Would be great. But that's not the world we're living in here. They do have some impending free agents. So you have Teddy Bridgewater is up. Melvin Gordon is up. You've got right tackle Bobby Massey is up. Bryce Callahan, really good slot corner. Can play a little bit outside as well. He's an impending free agency. Really good underrated linebacker Alexander Johnson is an impending free agent. Josie Jewell, his running mate at linebacker, is an impending free agent. In the secondary, you have Kyle Fuller and Kareem Jackson also about to hit free agency. So they do have some pieces to fill, but nobody I just named is like an irreplaceable loss if they were to let them go. Another player that I think I would look to either trade or release is Graham Glasgow. He's a right guard that they paid a lot of money in free agency. I think Quinn Miners played pretty well at right guard. Lloyd Cushenberry has developed nicely at center. So I think you can part ways with Glasgow, save a little bit of money there, and maybe get some draft capital for him. You might be able to get a 4th round pick for Graham Glasgow. Why not? But who would I re-sign out of that group? I would re-sign Alexander Johnson. About 30 years old. Fits your scheme really well. He's a good mentor for a guy like Baron Browning, who's still trying to learn the position. And those guys kind of build off each other really well. So I would re-sign Alexander Johnson. I don't think he would cost you that much. Probably looking at like 3 years, maybe even 2 years, 17 mil, something like that. And then I would also re-sign Bobby Massey because he was kind of a band-aid right tackle for you. But I think, you're really not guaranteed to get an upgrade from Bobby Massey. You're not. You'd have to either attract a different free agent in or, hope a guy like Trevor Penning or, you could hope Charles Cross is there in the draft, of course. But otherwise, you're, maybe Penning or Raymond in the second round, maybe. I don't think you're taking that guy at 9. Yeah, I just think it gives you a little bit of security to know that you have Bobby Massey at right tackle. He wouldn't cost a lot. You're probably looking at like 2 years, 15, 16 mil. And it just gives you that peace of mind that like, if we can't get a Charles Cross, if we can't land a big name free agent at tackle, you have an answer at right tackle. I think it's just really nice to know that you've got a good offensive line in place there no matter what. Because that right tackle is really the last weak link there. So I would just re-sign Alexander Johnson, Bobby Massey, let the rest of the guys go, and now we can head into free agency. So the remaining needs for the Broncos at this point: quarterback, edge, slot corner, and safety. So who would I target? On the edge, I would target Von Miller. That would be so sweet if you can let Miller go and you trade him for a second round pick and then he comes back. Like, that would be just front office genius, 3D chess by the Broncos. And I think he'd be willing to do it. He was talking about how much he missed his son that he had left in Denver when he was winning a Super Bowl for the Rams. So he has a lot of respect for that organization. It was a mutual parting of ways. And I could see him riding off into the sunset like he likes to do for the Broncos. I think that'd be a really cool story. Could be another situation where Zadarius Smith is available. He would be a big upgrade. Other 3-4 edge guys that they could plug in there: Harold Landry, Chandler Jones, Jadeveon Clowney. I would not be surprised if they landed a heavy hitter on the edge opposite of Bradley Chubb, who even him, he hasn't been this alpha edge guy. So I think Denver's going to be an attractive spot for a lot of these big name edge targets, and I think there's a good probability that they land one of those guys. And then at slot corner, I think there's a decent list of guys you could target to replace Bryce Callahan, who you could bring Callahan back. I don't think that's a lock that he's gone, but if you wanted to get cheaper there, Callahan hasn't been the best in Denver. Might be just time for a change of scenery there. You could go with a Desmond King, Mike Hughes. An interesting guy would be PJ Williams, who kind of emerged as a slot defender for the Saints last year. Maybe give him a full starting opportunity. He's a little bit older, but he's really impressed me. So you could go there. Darius Phillips, who struggled to get on the field for Cincinnati last year, but there's some cheaper slot options they could go if they don't retain Bryce Callahan. And then at safety, I do think it's a bit of a need. It's not like a glaring need. You have Caden Stearns, who you drafted last year, who showed some good flashes, but I don't think you really trust him as the starter heading into next year. You hope he can do that, but you don't know for sure. There's some really nice safety options that you could target. Tyrann Mathieu from the Chiefs would be like a crazy upgrade. It would be really fun to see him in a Fangio-style defense where he can run a little man coverage, quarters, show a little range up top. So that'd be a really nice fit. There's some other safeties that'd be a really good fit as well. Justin Reed from the Houston Texans. Marcus May from the Jets. I mean, those are some pretty big names that I don't know if their teams are going to re-sign them. And then Tracy Walker for the Lions would also probably benefit from playing in this sort of Fangio-style hybrid requirement of their safeties. So that's just kind of patching the roster, but the quarterback situation, we haven't figured that out yet. The only free agent that I would really think about is Jameis Winston, just because there is like a high volatility there. He was really good for the Saints last year. Would be exciting to see him with kind of this dream team, honestly. It's something to think about. Otherwise, do you go with Drew Lock? Hope he just takes this magic leap next year. God, I would hate to do that, but you are in desperate territory. Like, do you bring Teddy Bridgewater back? Do you see if Andy Dalton, like, can make the most of this team? It is like a load of crap at quarterback at this point. So do you draft a guy? Do you draft Kenny Pickett and then hope that in the thin air in Denver, the hand size maybe works out for him? Do you go from Teddy 2 gloves to Kenny 2 gloves? Maybe. God, at number 9, that is rich. I don't know who's trading up there either. Man, Malik Willis. That is a really big spot to draft Malik Willis, who I see as like a second-round talent at quarterback, has so much work to do. I don't think Malik Willis is going to be ready to start in the NFL for at least a year, if not 2. I guess if I had to take one, it'd probably be Willis because the upside's there, and maybe you do start Teddy Bridgewater for another year, or you start him behind Drew Lock or something, and just hope that you can keep this roster in place for next year for Malik Willis. I don't like that. Do you go with like Desmond Ridder at 9? God, I don't like doing that. Sam Howell, Matt Corral. God, it's so frustrating for the Broncos. Why didn't you take Justin Fields? I'm not even the biggest Justin Fields guy in the world, but everything would be so much clearer for them if it was like patch up a few spots and then hope Justin Fields takes a big leap in year 2. But now you're stuck here. You're stuck. And you're probably going to strike out at quarterback. And I'm sorry, Denver, but that's kind of the world you're in. If this is a what I would do scenario, I just can't justify the 9th pick on one of those quarterbacks. If you could trade down, that's great. If you get down to 20 and then you throw a dice at Malik Willis or Matt Corral or something like that, that's awesome. I would rather wait till the second round and hope that, Ritter's there, or hope that, Pickett maybe has this crazy fall, or Howell's there, or hell, Carson Strong, who I still would be, willing to take a gamble on. I would rather do that than pass up on, a George Karlaftis or some other really high profile prospect, a Charles Cross, for example, at number 9. Man, really, really difficult offseason for the Broncos. So fascinating in their own unique way. I can't wait to see who's their quarterback next year, because I don't know who it's going to be at this point. And that's all they need. This roster's awesome. And just a couple free agent signings in there could be even better. Let's move on to the Las Vegas Raiders. I started with those two teams, the Chargers and the Broncos, because we're like 35 minutes in. I started with those two teams because they're two of the more genuinely interesting off seasons of any team. The Raiders and the Chiefs are a little bit more straightforward. So the Raiders, for them, it's like extend Derek Carr. That's looking incredibly likely at this point. He's probably going to get a little bit more than I'd be comfortable giving him. Probably going to come in close to like $40 million. It's just the way the NFL works. If you're a top 16 quarterback and your contract is impending, you're going to get close to the top dollar. It's not right, but it's what you got to do. And they, to me, hired Josh McDaniels because Derek Carr is such a great fit with McDaniels' offense. So I am excited for that pairing. I think it's going to look really nice. After that, you head into free agency with a decent number of needs. Not a ton of big name free agents hitting the market for you. And about $20 million in cap space, which is 16th most in the league. So a little bit of flexibility. The players leaving your team are Zay Jones, who had a nice little back end of the year breakout for the Raiders, Deshaun Jackson, a couple of defensive tackles, Jonathan Hankins and Quentin Jefferson, opening up the middle of that defense. Casey Hayward, who was just so good for this team last year, but getting up in age and having a hard time staying on the field constantly. And then I also think they released Corey Littleton, who was a free agent signing that just has not worked out for them. It'll clear about another $10 million in cap space. So I would re-sign a decent amount of these guys because they really were good fits. And I don't think they'd be expensive. Casey Hayward, great fit. Deshaun Jackson, I think in another year with Derek Carr, could provide that Band-Aid deep threat is really what you're looking for there in Deshaun Jackson, because they have their deep threat in Henry Ruggs. That whole situation played out. You need a vertical presence there, and Deshaun Jackson can still do it when he's healthy. I would re-sign Zay Jones because he's depth. He's not going to cost you a ton of money. He's got a good rapport with Derek Carr. And I would re-sign Jonathan Hankins too, just because you could probably get a little bit of a hometown discount with him, and he's not a terrible defensive tackle up front. And then you look ahead to free agency, where your remaining needs are your entire offensive line, other than left tackle. Wide receiver, I still think is a need. Interior defensive line, cornerback, your number 2 starter outside of Trayvon Mullen. And then I think safety is a need because Jonathan Abram was Gruden's guy. He's terrible. He hasn't shown me an ounce of tape that makes me believe he can be a starting safety for you in this new regime. And also, you're bringing in, don't forget, the Raiders landed Patrick Graham, which was a steal of the offseason. Runs a really unique system that actually starts pretty much 3 safeties. Remember, they extended Logan Ryan for the Giants because they needed that third hybrid safety that can play a little slot corner, little bit of free safety, do a lot of disguise with what that player is going to be. That sure as effing heck is not Jonathan Abram. If anything, Jonathan Abram could play that Jabril Peppers role, but even then, I think he sucks. He's a backup. Cut him. I don't care. Jonathan Abram is a thing of the past, and safety is a need. I absolutely freaking love how Trayvon Merrick is going to fit in this system in the Xavier McKinney role for this defense. But yeah, both safeties really are a need. You need that hybrid Logan Ryan role, and you need that box safety role as well, because I don't trust Jonathan Abram to be that guy. So on the offensive line, I mean, you have so many needs there that it's almost pointless to say like who they could target. Just go down your list, call their agent, try to get as many free agent offensive linemen as you can. Get in that arms race. There's a couple names that I think could make sense. Trent Brown, only because you've got McDaniels coming over, and Trent Brown and McDaniels have a strong connection. I know Trent Brown kind of flamed out for the Raiders, and they kind of ended on bad blood. But if that was just a Gruden thing, maybe Brown would be willing to come back. I don't know. The other guy is Ted Karras, who's another Josh McDaniels guy. So you could lean into some of those strong connections with Josh McDaniels to get an edge in free agency. But for the most part, just take whatever you can get. Go down the list. Take any offensive lineman that'll sign there. I do think the Raiders are an attractive destination for those premium wide receiver free agents. Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin, DJ Chark could be that deep threat replacement for Henry Ruggs. Michael Gallup. I would not be the least bit surprised if one of these guys chooses to go to Las Vegas, gets a lot of money to go there. So that's good news for the Raiders. I think you could address that Henry Ruggs opening in free agency. And then as I look at the defense, there's a few players I'd be really excited that would be great scheme fits with this Patrick Graham defense that I think Raiders fans will like to hear about. So a big name guy that I think would be a perfect scheme fit to improve your interior defensive line is Calais Campbell, who I didn't even realize was an impending free agent, but he's on the list. In this defense, they have a very hybrid front, and they lean heavily on the role that Leonard Williams played for them, for the New York Giants. And that is a 5 technique defensive end with size who can defend the run from that position. And that's Calais Campbell. I would love to see Calais Campbell in the Leonard Williams role of this defense. So that would be an excellent fit. More of your interior run defense guys that would be good fits here. Shai Tuttle from New Orleans. Falorenzo Fadukasi could be that Dexter Williams nose tackle position there, or Dexter Lawrence rather. Nose tackle spot would be a great fit. Sebastian Joseph Day would fit this system. BJ Hill played with Patrick Graham in New York. They traded him away, so I don't know if he doesn't like him or whatever, but BJ Hill was on that Super Bowl defense for the Bengals. Could be an option. There's a lot of defensive tackles that would make a lot of sense for the Raiders. Cornerback, you got to remember the Giants signed Bradbury, James Bradbury, cornerback from the Panthers, lengthy, physical corner, really smart player. Carlton Davis could draw some similarities to the Bradbury signing with Patrick Graham there. Wouldn't be surprised if Patrick Graham was interested in spending big on a guy like Carlton Davis from Tampa Bay. Otherwise, you could get a little bit cheaper at corner. That same kind of physical profile. You're looking at Charvarius Ward, Akella Witherspoon, Levi Wallace, all could fit this defense really well. And also wouldn't rule out bringing Casey Hayward back either. So you got Trayvon Mullen, you got Nate Hobbs. Feel good about those two, but you do need an option at number 2 corner for them. And then at safety, as I mentioned, you might need 2 of these guys. One of my favorite free agent landing spots, right up there with like Sebastian Joseph Day to the Chargers, is Jabril Peppers reuniting with Patrick Graham on the Raiders. And they use him in that hybrid safety linebacker role. He's not a safety, he's not a linebacker, he's not a slot corner, but he is all of those things. Fits this defense really well. Unfortunately got injured last season. I don't know if the Giants, with their new defense, are going to see Peppers as a scheme fit necessarily. I wouldn't be surprised if he does hit the market. So Jabril Peppers coming back here would be sweet. There's other players in that kind of bandit safety role that could fit here very well as well, though. Guys like Terrell Edmonds from Pittsburgh, Keanu Neal. These guys should be free agents, so they would fit that role very well. And then if you are looking for that Logan Ryan style safety for the Raiders in this Patrick Graham defense, Desmond King, could he kind of convert back to safety? He's done a little bit of that. Kareem Jackson, does he have anything left in the tank? A guy that has been a corner and a safety. Damontae Kazee, same story. Played a little slot, played a little free safety. That's exactly what you are looking for in that Logan Ryan third safety role. Or, hey, Justin McCourty. He may have even been there with Patrick Graham in New England back like 4 or 5 years ago. So those would be some options in that hybrid role. And then as far as the draft goes, after free agency, it would depend kind of who they signed. But this could be an interesting spot for speed at wide receiver, whether that's Treylon Burks or Jamison Williams. I think offensive line would make a lot of sense for the Raiders as well. Guy like Zion Johnson potentially. Tyler Linderbaum sounds like he might be falling into that 20 range. Or is this a team that reaches at right tackle for a guy like Bernard Raymond or Trevor Penning? I think those 4 names on the offensive line would make a lot of sense if we see them go that route in real life. First round is too rich for me at like the 20th pick or whatever they have for Bernard Raymond or Trevor Penning, in my opinion. And that's the Raiders. Lastly, here we have the Kansas City Chiefs, who it's really not a complicated offseason. They're a pretty full roster, not a lot of big decisions to be made, but we'll still talk about them. So getting right into free agency, their impending list of free agents is fairly significant, but nothing crazy, I would say. So Orlando Brown, who they made the big trade for last year, is impending. Your right tackle, Andrew Wiley, who ended up starting after Lucas Niang went down, he's impending. Brian Pringle, who did a good job for them as their kind of third wide receiver, is going to be hitting the market. And then on defense, it's a lot of guys up front. Melvin Ingram, Derek Nadi, a good guy that's had success as a run-defending nose tackle for them, struggled a bit last year. Jerron Reed. Ben Neiman at linebacker, he's going to be gone. They've got young guys stepping in at linebacker, but a guy that's played a lot for them, Ben Neiman. Charvarius Ward is a good starting corner that, in my opinion, doesn't always get the credit he deserves as a good press man guy. And then Mike Hughes, guy they picked up, former first-round pick from the Vikings at cornerback, had a good year for them last year. There's going to be a market for him. And then, of course, Tyrann Mathieu. He's been a superstar safety for them. He wants to get that big contract at the back end of his career. So, for me, the Chiefs have one really big question that they need to answer. Would you rather keep Orlando Brown or keep Tyrann Mathieu? And they could potentially really work the cap and find a way to keep them both. But to me, in my opinion, these are B-level players that will be demanding A-level money. And you would be maxing yourself out if you kept both. And I would even consider letting them both go if their tackle situation wasn't such a disaster had they let Orlando Brown go. To me, you got to keep Orlando Brown. You made the big trade for him. He was solid at left tackle. I think he's a little bit overrated. He's going to demand like franchise left tackle money, and I can't justify $20 million for Orlando Brown. But I kind of have to if I'm the Chiefs here because he's better than the next guy. So I think you got to let Matthew go. I really do, because if you keep them both and you pay both these guys close to $20 million, I mean, you're really pushing the cap. You're letting all these other guys leave, and you have no room to sign anybody else, and they have a lot of other holes remaining. So I don't think Brown or Matthew make everybody else so much better that they're worth keeping. I don't think these are premium superstar players, even though their name value brings that. I genuinely think both these guys are a touch overrated, and Chiefs fans probably don't want to hear that, but these are the tough conversations you've got to have when you're, trying to squeeze $40 million between the two of them into $11 million of cap space. You can do that, but it really, really puts, it puts some dampers on what you can do elsewhere. So I would keep Orlando Brown, but I would let Tyrann Mathieu hit the market. It's a tough decision, but I think you got to make it. The players I would re-sign here, I would re-sign Byron Pringle. I think he'd be really cheap. If nothing else, he can be a wide receiver 4 for you next year. I would keep either Charvarius Ward or Mike Hughes, because if you let them both go, you have a glaring hole at your third cornerback position. They like to press these guys. They want to have 3 quality corners out there. I think you got to find a way to keep one of those 2 guys. Neither should be crazy expensive, probably in the $5 to $6 million range. And then if Derek Nadi would be really cheap, I would bring him back, because otherwise your depth at defensive tackle is looking really bad. But I'm not paying Nadi anything north of like $2 or $3 million. So you'd have to kind of monitor that situation. As you head into free agency, then your biggest needs are edge rush, because they can't really get out of Frank Clark's terrible contract. Not this year, at least. Safety, because we let Tyrann Mathieu go. Right tackle is a big need, because Wiley's gone, and Lucas Niang is fine. If you have to start Niang at right tackle next year, you can live with it. But if you can upgrade there on the cheap, I would do it. Wide receiver, I think they could use some value there. They don't need any superstars, but if they can find value with a third wide receiver, at times that was a situation that you weren't getting someone else to step up with all the attention on Hill and Kelsey. And then I think defensive tackle, they could also look as well. But edge, this is part of why I would let Matthew go, because you were able to retain Charvarius Ward, so your corners aren't depleted. You have 3 starting corners, and you'll have more money to go and sign an edge player. So, you're not going to have a ton of money. You're not going to go get Zadarius Smith or Harold Landry or some super expensive edge guy, but you can go get a starter like a Jerry Hughes maybe, who has a little bit left in the tank. Maybe Jason Pierre-Paul for really cheap. Mario Addison. Maybe you roll the dice on like Charles Harris, who had a breakout year for the Lions, a former first-round pick. Kamoko Toure, can he get healthy and break out for you? Those would be some players I would target to start opposite of Frank Clark on the edge. And then you can still spend some money at safety to replace Tyrann Mathieu. I think Matthew's a B player. I think you can get a C player, a quality starter like Anthony Harris, Rodney McLeod, DeMonte Kazee, Malik Hooker. You can downgrade at safety, but keep a third corner. Go get a number 2 edge. I would rather do that than just give another superstar contract out. They have enough of those on this Chiefs team. They need to fill out the depth a little bit more. This would also allow you to maybe go get like a Cornelius Lucas or a Riley Reif to start at right tackle. I'd feel better about that than starting Lucas Niang. And then you could potentially squeeze in like a Juju Smith-Schuster or a Cedric Wilson, a good slot receiver like a Jamison Crowder or a Christian Kirk. If you re-sign Orlando Brown and you re-sign Tyrann Mathieu, it's not the end of the world, but you can kiss free agency goodbye. And you're going to have these massive holes at number 2 edge, at right tackle, and frankly, at wide receiver. You might not even be able to keep Byron Pringle if you do that. So I just would rather have the depth and let Mathieu go, because I love Mathieu, but I don't think he's this game-changing safety that's worth $20 million a year for the Chiefs. So it's a tough decision, but that's the way I look at it for the Chiefs. And then in the draft, first round, I think you can also find a starter at one of these positions of need for you. So you could go edge with like Jermaine Johnson or maybe Trayvon Walker. I'm a little up and down on Trayvon Walker on if I would spend a first on him, but I see the traits and how he could get to become a really good player. Defensive tackle, like maybe put like a Devontae Wyatt or even a DeMarvin Leal next to Chris Jones could really open up the pass rush just because of the attention that Chris Jones draws there. This could be a decent landing spot for like Bernard Raymond or Trevor Penning to improve at right tackle at the end of the first round, or wide receiver. Do you look at like a David Bell to give you a little bit more of that bigger target? Or hell, does Drake London fall because of a bad 40 time in the next couple of days here at the Combine? Those would all be pretty good targets for the Chiefs in the first round. So I think if you let Mathieu go, you can really patch up the big holes for the Chiefs and actually have a better roster than you had last year, even without your superstar safety there. And hell, if maybe in the draft, you're thinking about a safety at the end of the first round too. A guy like Daxton Hill would be an awesome replacement for Tyrann Mathieu if you were there. So it's not all doom and gloom if you let Tyrann Mathieu go. You can find a replacement for him. All right, there was the AFC West. That was a long one. I don't think the other ones will take that long. Thanks, Chargers. Thanks, Broncos, for having such fascinating off seasons. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Please do drop your feedback down below. What you think of this series, of the format. And do hit that like button. I really hope these videos do well because it is a lot to do. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please do hit that like button if you did. And enjoy the Combine. We'll see you in a couple days for another one of these. Peace out.